And a good Tuesday morning, everybody. What's going on? This is Birds 365 along with John McMullen. I'm Mike Gill. I'm going to try to figure out how to do this, John. I think I got it. I think we got to handle this thing
I
already.
think you got some experience
1 minute
hosting the
in, I
thing.
think I figured this thing out, man.
Yeah,
How
man.
are you, brother?
I'm doing well. It's good to see Mike Gill. It's always good to see Mike. For people that don't know, Mike is one of the reasons this show exists. I always say, we have a lot of national viewers here on Burst 365. Mike, international even. I get international emails sometimes, and thank you for listening to and watching Burst 365. But locally in the Delaware Valley, we used to do a segment that was pretty popular and kind of convinced some people that you could talk NFL football all year round.
Yeah, the genesis of this conversation, and we'll get into an interesting conversation, I think, today, John, that you and I, so however many years ago, John was covering the league nationally for, I think it was Sports Network.
Yeah.
And you had called me and we had a couple of conversations. I used to have you on once a week and we would go through the schedule. And then you said, listen, I'm going to start covering the Eagles and get more into the Eagles. What do you think, about this idea? I said, you think we could talk about the NFL and the Eagles every single day? He said, yeah. So we had a segment called Football at 4 every day, 4 o'clock. Me and John talked football, Eagles basis, but a little NFL. The segment still stands on my show. John doesn't do it. We still have John on the air. But here I am all these years later, Football at 4 at 8 o'clock in the morning. Let's go. All right. Well, I could talk Eagles and football with you for hours. You and I know that. But I woke up this morning and saw a tweet from Robert Griffin III that I thought was a good basis of our first conversation here. Robert Griffin III, who's an interesting cat. I don't know what you think about him as an analyst or, what he brings to the table. But he said this: the Philadelphia Eagles already have the best roster in the NFL. And now they have two $25 million wide receivers. Do the Eagles, are we overlooking this team? Do they really have the best roster in the NFL? Is there something we're missing? Are we holding last 7-game debacle too much? Are we putting too much stock in what we saw there? Are we overlooking what this roster is? John, let's break down this roster a little bit and kind of look at it. Do they really have the best roster in the NFL?
Well, I think, I like RG3, by the way. I think,
he's a very positive guy.
Yeah, and his rookie season, for those who don't remember, was absolutely phenomenal. And then he sort of went out on the shield in the playoffs. Yes, the Washington at the time Redskins were in the playoffs because of him largely, and he tore his ACL and his LCL. Basically the same injury as Carson Wentz when he was injured here during the Super Bowl season. Very, very serious injury. Was never the same. Obviously, a lot of his game was based on his movement skills, his off-schedule stuff, his running ability. Tremendous athlete, and his career never continued on that same trajectory, which is sad because he was a great player that rookie season. He's also a quarterback, though, and I think people get caught up in skill position people, Mike, and they say, "Well, the Eagles have great skill position player." But does that mean they have the best roster?
Hold on one sec. Many people, John, also feel the Eagles had the best offensive line in football.
They do. And offensively, but there's two sides of the football, Mike.
True, but that took them to the playoffs the year where they didn't have very good skill players. So if you look at their offense, let's start on that side of the ball. And by the way, Scott Grayson was going to join us in about 13, 14 minutes from now. Brandon Lee Gouton, who I've never met or never talked to before. I'm looking forward to that. Will join us at the 9 o'clock hour, and we can kind of get their thoughts on this because I know we all have different opinions. But let's start on offense. The offensive line, the skill position players, and the quarterback. Are we thinking that that is the basis of the best roster, at least offensively in football?
Yeah, I think you can make a strong argument the Eagles have the most talent on the offensive side. I would say to RG3, let's wait till after the draft as well, because people are going to add, and there's going to be tremendous shifting, obviously, with the draft coming up next week. But as we stand here today, yeah, I think the Eagles are in the conversation for having the most talented offense in the NFL. Um, concern losing Jason Kelsey. I think you can't just assume that Cam Jurgens is going to hit the ground running. I think he's going to be fine, but we have to wait and see. And obviously, by moving Cam Jurgens back inside, Mike, you have to worry about right guard. It's pretty clear the Eagles don't think Tyler Steen is um, ready-made, so to speak, so the fact that they can just hand him the job, and they might take a first-round pick on a right guard, at least early, and then kick him out the right tackle whenever Lane Johnson decides to retire. So there are some question marks. Backup tight end. They just brought on CJ Uzama, who's a veteran guy and maybe offers you a little bit more than a Grant Calcaterra or an Albert Agwegbanon. So somebody like that, they still have
Strong pull
there. Um, you know, how much does he have left, though? He's 31-year-old guy going on 32. At his height in Cincinnati, you know what? He's pretty good old school tight end. But how much does he have left in the tank? He didn't live up to a big free agent deal he signed with the Jets. So there's some holes. But overall, when you compare to everybody else, everybody has holes. I would say the Eagles have amongst the most talent in the NFL, but they're also shifting. New offensive coordinator, new quarterbacks coach. How does Jalen Hurts handle that? Is Saquon Barkley the special presence that Howie Roseman says he is? Back in 2018, I would have bought that. I talked about that with you and a lot on this show. This is post ACL Saquon Barkley. This is 1,500 touch Saquon Barkley. Typically, that's the kind of player the Eagles run from. And all of a sudden, they're running to him. So I think there's question marks over the evaluation of Saquon Barkley and how much he has left.
Yeah.
But I get it from RG3's perspective as a quarterback. He sees A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, and goes, I wish I'd have that if I were still quarterbacking in the NFL.
Yeah, well, and listen, most people would also like the Eagles' offensive line as well. You got to throw that in. But as you mentioned, the right guard spot, that's really, the one area on either side of the ball, right? I don't know. You talk about the best roster. Do they have a set 22? No, the right guard spot. But is every other spot set? Or are we going to see competitions on this roster? Because that's what makes the best roster, John, when there's competition, because that means you have depth. But do you look at it right now and say, I think the starting we know the right guard spot's up, but everybody else, do you think that those are already penned in?
Well, the 11 on offense, I would say 2 are open-ended, and that's right guard and that third wide receiver, because they're going to be an 11 personnel team. So they're going to have 3 wide receivers on the field. Even if we want to go 12, we just talked about with 2 tight ends, we just talked about the backup tight end. That's open-ended. But, they brought in Paris Campbell. They brought in Devontae Parker. I think Parker's more of an outside backup for AJ and Devontae Smith. I don't think he's in the conversation to be that sort of slot receiver. And the Eagles can manipulate it because AJ and Devontae are so well-rounded. They can move inside to the slot and play Parker outside. But I wouldn't feel comfortable and say, well, all right, Paris Campbell's the guy as a third receiver. Devontae Parker's the guy. Are they going to be better than Quez Watkins? Maybe. But I still think, receiver is still one of those sneaky needs that, probably not in the first round now. And I thought it was before the Devontae Smith extension, I thought it was an outside chance they might take a receiver. Now, unlikely, but
you don't
think
think the possibility. So this is interesting. Like they sign Devontae yesterday. He gets this extension and they do what they do. They get ahead of Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's guys that need extensions. They get ahead. They set the tone, right? Okay. You got A.J. Brown on the other side. Is he going to, say, Well, then I need my deal redone, or is this a precursor to them moving on from Brown? Does draft night give us that answer? If they take a player at 22 or 50, is that them saying, you got one more shot with A.J. Brown, you better make it work?
AJ is going to be difficult for a number of reasons. I never thought Devontae was going to be difficult because, to be honest, he's not quite as good as AJ Brown. So when you talk about AJ, you're talking about top 5 receiver in football. And then we've talked a lot about the incoming deals or upcoming deals for Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, which will reset the wide receiver market. So when the Eagles look to extend AJ Brown, which will probably be next year because that's when the cap number kind of spikes for him. His value is going to be greater because of what happens with Jefferson and Chase. And, even if those guys are traded, they're going to get big money deals. Wherever they go, they're going to get big, big, big money deals, reset the market, go above Tyreek Hill, and talking about well over $30 million. So how high do you have to go with A.J. Brown? That's why I say wide receiver still sneaky need for this team. Probably not in the first round. Probably wasn't going to be in the first round anyway, but there was an outside chance if Brian Thomas dropped a little bit that they might go in that direction. But starting in the second round, that's still a sneaky need for this team. And AJ is going to be a little bit more difficult. But Devontae, man, the fact they got that deal done, this team, and I asked Joe Banner yesterday, he hasn't answered me yet. I'm hoping he answers me today, but because Joe started this, sort of identifying foundational pieces that the Eagles, and it's really Andy Reid even more than Joe, but directing the team in that direction. The fact that they were able to get Devontae Smith done with that deal, and we'll see the nuts and bolts of it when it gets filed, Mike, with the NFLPA, it's going to look even better. And in a copycat league, why other teams don't copy what the Eagles do mystifies me.
I say that all the time. Well, it's not that they don't try to copy. I mean, how many people from the Eagles front office that you've never heard of are getting jobs? I mean, they're all over the place. Every offseason, there's somebody getting an interview and 2 or 3 people getting jobs. I mean, it seems like every year they're losing at least 1, if not 2 people that you've never heard of.
Yeah, but it's more, but from you're right. And I think that's more personnel related. Although, Andrew Berry is a very business minded guy in Cleveland and he runs things sort of like the Eagles do. And we'll see. I mean, Jake Rosenberg is leaving after the draft. We'll see where he ends up because he's a big part of the contract part of it. So
Catherine
Rach is Cats with Andrew Berry, though. So those two kind of go together with one team. And by the way, Cleveland's doing a great job with that kind of stuff. So people should pay attention to that.
I always, the people who don't like Roseman, and this isn't like a whole Howie Roseman thing, but like he makes mistakes. There's draft picks that frustrate you. There's things they do. But in the end, it's like what other GM does and is able to, you're not going to hit on 100% of the thing.
No.
If you want someone to hit on 100%, then you're not going to be ever satisfied. But I feel like it is so obvious that he runs circles around 80% of the others that do this job. I mean, if I was to say to the listeners, the viewers out there, give me the definitive best GM in football, I don't know that anybody even has an answer. It's just like people complain just to complain, where to me, the clear answer is if you want someone to build a team long-term, make mistakes, fix mistakes, but keep it stable, I don't know that there's anyone close to Roseman.
Yeah, well, look, when we talk about do they have the best roster, they're probably in the top 5. So as long as you're in the conversation, if things break right for you, you could certainly be in that small group or that small list of teams. Same thing with GMs. Howie's certainly top 5, and whether he's number 1 like he was a couple years ago, or he's in the conversation like he was last year for a large majority of the season, he's going to be in that conversation.
Do you have a guy that you think's definitively, or a 2 or 3 that are in that conversation?
Well, people look at Brett Beach in Kansas City because of what and where did he come from? Philadelphia. It's kind of amazing how it works that way. Obviously, John Lynch has built a heck of a roster in San Francisco, which I think the way he started kind of surprises people. I always bring up, and I probably brought it up, I bring it up on this show a lot. I probably brought it up with you, Mike. Jeffrey Lurie deserves a big part of this as well, because so many other GMs are GMing, as I say, for their job every year. They got to do this. They got to worry about the immediacy of winning games, or they might not have a next season. Howie has the luxury of being patient, looking at it long term. It's what I would argue with Jody about with Hassan Reddick. A lot of GMs, and Joe Douglas also from here, he can't GM like Howie Roseman can, because he can give up a future premium pick in 2026. He doesn't even know if he's going to use it. So what does it matter to Joe Douglas? Whereas other people are saying, well, look at what Snead got and look at what Brian Burns got. You're not going to get a day 2 pick for Hassan Reddick. People were saying that consistently up to the trade, including myself, by the way, Mike. I'll raise my hand. I say there's no way he's getting that. Guess what? He's outside the box. Well, maybe he can't get it in 2024. Maybe he can't get it in 2025.
Yeah.
But he got it in 2026.
Well, that's the thing. I think your point is the best point, is that Roseman can make moves knowing he can make mistakes, but that should be the norm. You should be able to make mistakes because you're going to make mistakes. The fear of having to win and make the perfect move every time is why these teams are failing and crashing and recycling, and they can't get out of their own way. It's why the Eagles fans, it's why we have this show. It's why we have shows like this, because the Eagle fans know every year that they are going to be in contention. Do they have the best roster? Like RG3 said, we'll debate it. We'll talk about it more. Scott Grayson from Fox 29, another one of my buddies. We do Grayson's grades after every Eagles game on 97.3 ESPN. And he does a great job of getting in the locker room, breaking down the stuff. And we'll take a look. I'll ask him, does he think this roster is the best roster? He can grade this roster. We'll do that coming up in just a couple of moments when we're back here. Johnny Mack, Mike Gill on Birds 365.